The following episode will profile Mexican Mafia member Raymond Shryock, also known as Huero Shy from Artesia, a white man with a brown heart. Belonging to a Mexican street gang in Los Angeles requires as much emphasis on gang identity as with ethnic purity. People of Mexican descent are already mestizos, meaning mixed, by the fact they originate from Mexican native Indian and Spanish bloodlines. Many of the street gangs back in the day had their token white dudes, the remnants of white flight, and many families who experienced the identical financial plights as their brown and black counterparts. The Mexican Mafia would be no different in their recruiting practices with regard to who they embrace for membership. Like the barrios, the governing criteria for ME recruitment included your propensity for violence, willingness to perform selflessly, leadership qualities, courage, and your heart had to be brown. A Mexican heart was certainly one important criterion for becoming a made man. Raymond Maines Shryock is also known as Huero Shy and was born on July 16, 1951. Although his racial background is Caucasian or white, his mother being from Kansas, Huero Shy was raised in the LA suburb of Artesia, was embraced by the homeboys, and was part of the Arta 13 in crowd. Growing up in any gang neighborhood is already an automatic proving ground for aspiring and newly recruited street gang members. For a non-Mexican, the threshold for acceptance into that circle of young men was higher. Huero Shy from Artesia would work harder than the average gangster to prove his worthiness into the Mexican gang underworld. From the beginning at juvenile hall and youth incarcerations, he was affectionately referred to as a gabacho loco, Spanish for crazy white boy. Like many of his street gang counterparts, Huero Shy was raised by the state of California, doing time in the California Youth Authority and establishing his criminal resume inside the penal system. Although his last name is correctly pronounced Shryock, just like it's spelled, he was often referred to as Huero Shyrock, Huero Shy, and many of us simply called him Shy. Huero Shy entered the prison system at the age of 19 and was sent to DVI, the Dual Vocational Institution in Tracy. Considered the last stop for youth offenders, there was a good mix of CYA and adult convicts housed together. In early 1971, Huero Shy, already a leader of the Artesia street gang, became the second white dude, the other one was Joe Morgan, to join the Mexican Mafia. Huero Shy was one of 11 members sponsored by OG member Richard Richie Ruiz in what is to this day considered the largest concentration of new recruits to be made at one time. With ages ranging from 17 to 22 and an average age of 19 and a half, we affectionately referred to them as the Young Guns. After putting in work and terrorizing DVI, Huero Shy was transferred to San Quentin sometime in early 1973 and quickly integrated with the members at that prison who had regained control of the yard following the War of 1972 against the Nuestra Familia. Huero Shy became part of the San Quentin mop-up effort, a cleansing of rival NF members and associates. NF members who were transferred to DVI and Soledad prisons were doing the same thing to ME associates there. Folsom was already under ME control. The end of the 1972 war led to the separation of all ME and NF validated prison gang members from each other. This introduced a period in which each group solidified their strongholds. the M and NF began to reevaluate many of their own to determine who was not performing and undertook disciplinary measures leading to fatal resolution. On May 30th, 1973, Huero Shy teamed up with two fellow members to take out another CARNAL who was no good. Eddie Lopez, also known as Güero Green Eyes from Florencia 13, was rocked to sleep and taken to the San Quentin gym, which was a blind spot with no gun coverage. In the locker area, under the ruse of sharing some heroin, he was stabbed, strangled, and beaten with a pipe by Huero Shy, Davy Perez from San Francisco, and Chente from East Los. A bad apple had been taken care of. No one was apprehended, and Huero Shy made his bones by participating in his first 187, Penal Code for Murder, on behalf of La M. In the eyes of the fellas, he was no longer a virgin. The first is always the most unforgettable, and I have no doubt Huero Shy remembers every morbid detail of that day. After the initial 187, it gets easier, and the white boy with the Mexican heart would thereafter become a programmed, unrepentant killing machine. Huero Shy was the kind of guy you wanted in the trenches with you when the caca hit the proverbial fan. During a debriefing session that lasted almost a month, I shared detailed profiles of every existing Mexican Mafia member up through 1978. When we arrived to Huero Shy's name, I remember describing him as a game soldier, who was more of a follower than a leader at that time. Looking back, I could say the same about all of us at some point. We are all game soldiers, and if you remain in the game long enough and performing at a high level, your status propels you to the top of the food chain. Because there is no real godfather in La M, believe me, there is plenty of room at the top. This group photo taken in the San Quentin lower yard shows Huero Shy in the upper left throwing out the black hand, meaning death to our adversaries. 1 month after this was taken, Güero Green Eyes, squatting in the lower right, would be taken out for committing an unpardonable offense. That was life in the M. One day you're on top of the world, celebrated by your fellow mob confederates for a job well done. The next day you are on the short end of a prison-made shank. Huero Shy would be performing for the Mexican Mafia for many decades to come. Take a look at the guy in the upper right holding out his hand. This is Bruno Chavez from the Avenues, a Mexican Mafia carnal. More on him coming next. Huero Shy would parole in the mid-1970s and was heavily involved in MS Street drug operations. He would become one of the go-to guys on an internal matter that came up in Los Angeles in early 1977. Bruno Chavez, previously mentioned and shown in this San Quentin group photograph about 4 years prior during happier times, suddenly found himself having traveled from the penthouse to the basement. In other words, he had fallen from grace with the fellas. When you fall from grace, it's time for you to go to Brazil. Thanks to some good old Mexican Mafia politics, Bruno was done, only he didn't know it. On February 11th, 1977, Huero Shy volunteered to accompany Alfie Sosa. Yes, the dreaded name some of you are tired of hearing, so you may wish to cover your eyes and ears. Together, the two paid a visit to an old friend and fellow M member in the Glacial Park section of Los Angeles, where they proceeded to stab him to death, prison style. About 3 weeks later, Huero Shy and several of his fellow MS sidekicks were arrested in a pre-dawn series of police raids throughout Los Angeles in connection with 10 Mexican Mafia-related murders. Huero Shy would fly under the radar for almost 2 decades and avoided major prosecution. On October 15, 1988, longtime Mexican Mafia member Jose Sluggo Piñera from El Paso, Texas, was taken out by Huero Shy and an unknown accomplice. Sluggo's body was found near the railroad tracks in Hazard Park, a short distance from the Big Hazard Ramona Gardens. He had been stabbed multiple times and his throat was split from ear to ear. The order came from inside, and it was Benjamin Topo Peters who issued the green light. Although Sluggo had become dead weight, a non-productive member, and Topo did not like him, those were insufficient reasons to kill him. Sluggo crossed the line when he attempted raping Topo's mother and threatened her with bodily harm. That was more than enough to send him to Brazil. I will not show you the graphic crime scene photos for obvious reasons, but they went to work on him. According to homicide investigators, Huero Shy's handiwork was evident. According to the many defensive wounds, Sluggo apparently put up a fight, but it was his time to go, and once again, Bethlehem steel would prevail. Born on November 20th, 1931, Sluggo Piñera was a month shy of his 57th birthday when he left this world. Huero Shy became one of the major Mexican Mafia players on the streets of L.A. They were the boots on the ground, creators of a revolutionary program installed and ingrained into the Mexican gang landscape. The Pepsi generation is a term from the Chapter 20 title of The Black Hand, an excellent book written by author Chris Blatchford about the life of Rene Boxer Enriquez. Used in conjunction with the Mexican Mafia for the first time, I borrow it to describe the 1990s generation, a historical and significant time frame with aftershocks reverberating to this day. Embracing and placing Southern and Central California street gangs under M.E. control began in L.A. and Orange County, right around the time the movie American Me was released. As I've stated in other episodes, no marketing genius could have timed this any better. Huero Shy, Pee-wee Aguirre from the Avenues, Chuco Castro and Chuy Martinez from Barrio Nuevo, and a host of other street M.E. members surrounded themselves with brutal street enforcers from all the major gangs. You had 18th Street blasting away throughout the county. MS-13 established the El Salvador brand of machete-swinging brutality. Florencia 13 went at it with black gangs, and automatic weapons flooded Mexican and black neighborhoods. Possibly the most turbulent period in street gang history in terms of sheer ferocity, La M would harness this violent energy and create a criminal empire. Historically speaking, closing the books for M membership takes place periodically for various reasons. Every so many years, a house cleaning takes place where bad apples are eliminated before new blood can be considered. It's also a great excuse given to camaradas who are putting in work and expecting to be sponsored in as made men. Such was the case in 1995. The books were closed and Huero Shy fought hard to recruit an El Monte gang member by the name of Luis Maciel, a.k.a. Pelon. Caught on an FBI surveillance tape fighting case for Pelon, Huero Shy convinced his carnales to open the books, vote in Pelon, then close the books and resume the no recruiting status. This surveillance photo shows Pelon, in the cap and dark sweatshirt, being voted in, welcomed, and embraced by his new M members. He is hugged by Sammy Villalba, also known as Negro from Artesia. A funny backstory. As Pelon was escorted to the hotel room to learn of the vote outcome, the thought passed through his head that maybe he was about to be whacked for some screw-up he committed. In that world during that time, one never really quite knew what was up. Any brief concerns about a swift trip to Brazil were put to rest when the fellas present took turns welcoming him aboard with embraces and backslaps. The first order of business from Huero Shy to Pelon, also caught on FBI surveillance tape, was a directive to have Mexican Mafia defector Dito Moreno taken out and any eyewitnesses present inside the El Monte residence. Reminiscent of the Godfather movie scene, Pelon was at his infant child's baptism as a team of Sangra shooters were dispatched to do the job. On April 22, 1995, 5 people were shot dead in what was called the Maxon Road murders. When it was over, Dito Moreno, 2 other adults, and 2 infants, a 5-year-old girl and a 6-month-old boy, were dead. 2 other children escaped, a 6-year-old boy and his 2-year-old sister, left alive because the shooter ran out of bullets. The gang member who killed the children was Jimmy Palma, also known as Character from Sangra. If you search YouTube, type in 60 Minutes Mexican Mafia to view this tragic story in more detail. Although Huero Shy had given instructions that no witnesses be left alive, someone didn't send or receive the memo that La M doesn't target children. 60 Minutes wanted me to go on camera to say that La M kills children, but I knew better. Someone simply screwed up big time, and I told them the M would conduct a more thorough investigation, better than even the homicide detectives, and in the end they would administer their own brand of justice. I don't think they were thrilled with that response. In the end, that's exactly what would take place. Say whatever you wish about these guys, and I'm not one to defend what they do, but the M does not target children. Such acts do not agree with their warrior mentality, and for the most part is considered taboo and an act of cowardice. 9 days after the Maxon Road tragedy, Huero Shy was scooped up with many fellow Mexican Mafia members in the first targeted federal RICO indictment against the fellas. On May 29, 1997, Huero Shy and 12 others were convicted of multiple racketeering charges. On September 2nd, he was sentenced to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. 2 days after Huero Shy's sentencing, Character was received on San Quentin's condemned row. On October 13, 1997, slightly over a month after his arrival, Character was allowed to exercise on the death row yard with condemned Mexican Mafia members also on the row. As everyone prepared for a basketball game, he was stabbed multiple times in the chest and bled out on the yard. Some say even the prison guards took their time getting him the necessary medical attention, but at the end of the day, this cannot be confirmed. When Huero Shy's protege, Pelon Maciel, arrived to death row, he decided he wouldn't let the fellas preempt his day with the state-mandated sentence to death. Figuring California's historical reluctance to enforce the death penalty gave him many more years to live, Pelon locked up on death row. After entering the federal prison system, Huero Shy supposedly experienced minor turbulence for the handling of the Maxon Road incident, but he survived the backbiting. After all, you really cannot hold the man responsible for what Jimmy Palma somehow believed was the right thing to do. For the fellas, it's more convenient and easier to take out a sureño than to do a carnal. Holding Huero Shy accountable would be like making every member responsible for M members they sponsor who go bad, or let's extend it even further. Society can hold the M accountable for everyone who dies of an overdose resulting from drugs sold by the fellas. Now there's a concept. Barring an unforeseen development, Huero Shy will celebrate his 71st birthday on July 16, 2022, inside the federal United States Penitentiary in Victorville, California. Since his body has been remanded to the penal system forever, I would like to lift him up to the Lord for the salvation of his soul. May the Lord's Holy Spirit rock Huero Shy and his family and pluck him from the grasp of hell. He is shown here with Bunny, his faithful wife of over 50 years, during happier times. I pray the Lord will use Bunny to lead his soul away from the dark hell on earth he has already traveled. Thank you for hearing our prayer, for where 2 or more are gathered in his name, the Lord is there and he hears us. Amen.